Right, this is part 2 of Willy Lott's Cottage, and I'm going to now start with the greenery, and I'll work from this side across so that I'm not working over myself. Lots of colour in this greenery, so it's going to be a challenge for me not to actually make it look too picture book like. So I want it to look as natural as possible. So here we go, let's see how we get on. I'm using my big foliage brush here to quite wet, trying not to touch too many times in the same place, and trying not to create another too rounded a shape. And then maybe a bit more depth in there with a round brush, which is also going to break the monotony, and because it's dark over this side, keep the eye into my picture. Right, I'll let that dry a bit, I think, before putting in any little branches that I might see and any more depth there. But there's a dark green bush just in the front of this one. And that's why I did that one first, because this is darker and I can go over the top of that edge there, creating another little bush. These foliage brushes actually really work well to help you not to actually touch too much, and leaving light and creating a fairly realistic looking end result. But if you don't have one, you could use your flat brush, or you could use a round brush. Maybe do a bit of practice first. So this has actually got some depth in it in the way of some red here as well, which is bringing it together nicely. And also dropping water back in will actually spread it around and make it look nice and natural as well. So, and don't judge it till it's dry, because it's going to look better when it's dry. Okay, so I think that's all I need to do there. Some more greenery popping out from the other side, which is a brighter green. So I've got the other mix of the Aureolin and Windsor Blue, just to pop in a little bit of greenery around here, coming out from behind that little bush there. It'll look better when it's dry, it'll look better when I've actually popped in some little branches and things. Okay, so that's that area. The shape of that area is in now. Pop a little bit more of this red in, alizarin, while it's, and burnt sienna, which is keeping it nicely together with the rooftops, while that is still damp. Right, we have a sort of mustard coloured bush to deal with now, so I think that looks a bit like cadmium yellow, and it's coming out from behind with some greenery in it. It's coming out from behind the rooftop, so to protect my rooftop I've got a piece of straight edged card there. So let's see how that works. I've been a bit heavy-handed with the drawing actually, well, insofar as the strength of the graphite, so that you could see it, but ease up on that so that it doesn't actually show. I can maybe rub it out afterwards, which is possible, usually. So, not quite there, because it's got quite a bit of greenery going on in here as well. Oh, that looks all right. That's quite natural looking. I'm pleased with that one. So making sure that it does come up right towards the edge of your rooftop, because that's going to help for it then to go back behind the rooftop, which always looks, which is always helpful with your perspective and everything. So there's a lot of dark green here with a little bit of red in it. So I'm going to use my round brush. Now I can go right over the gate because I've masked it off. Right. Good. There seems to be some grass here, so a little bit of a paler green going on by the side of the road there. And a lighter green bush here. This is all helping to give depth to the picture and perspective with one thing going on. Gets a bit busy, but there we are. With all this sort of, these layers, is giving depth to the picture. Possible to go back later and put a bit more depth in here and there when you feel you need it. There's a little bit of a green bush showing up, peeping out from behind the house, which is good because that's showing a division between the two areas of the house. Right, good. Now more to do. Clean piece of card to protect again here, and quite a bright green tree or trees going on behind. So I'm using my round brush because it's allowing me to make smaller marks. And to work round the chimney pot. Where's it gone? There it is. Another bright green tree here with a lot of blue in it. So there's no need to labour over your greenery, it's less is more. It gets darker here. So the darker you make it here, the more forward your roof top's going to come, which is a good thing. Okay. Dropping water back into foliage, as I just said, always helps to make it look natural and gives nice shapes. Right, so not much more to do. There's just some more greenery down the side here, but it's dark. With some red in it. Red and green, complementary colours, always look good. Right. There's a twiggy tree here, and this will get left out because it's not in the space on my page. We've got quite a lot of greenery happening anyway, so let's see what we can do about this. Twiggy tree here. The light's shining on my picture. So I'm going to draw it the way it's growing. Keeping an eye on the actual picture, but not following it completely. And it's a good idea really not to put in quite as much in the way of branches as you might see in a picture like this. It can look way too overdone. So there's another one here, tangled up with that one. So keep this brush upright for really tiny branches. Bear down a little bit more for anything that's a little bit deeper. So it's got some leaf on it, which is going to break up the monotony nicely. And I'm putting it on while it's still damp actually, because then it's going to look a bit blended and a bit more watercolour-y. Bit more painterly. So that's that little tree, trees there. Okay, let that dry and see what happens. While I've got this brush out, I'll just put a few branches going through here. So through the gaps, and a few in front as well, I guess. Not seeing that many. Nothing much in here either. Seeing a few more at the top here. Quite thick branch there. There's a few going on in here, but it's mostly greenery, to be honest. Keep this one lighter, otherwise it's going to look too harsh. Bit more greenery going on behind there, which is good because it's changed the shape of the tree a bit, which I think it needed. Okay, let's see what happens when that's dry. A few branches going on here. I like to put the branches in afterwards so that I can thread them through, because I find if you put them on before putting the foliage on, then all the foliage ends up in front. But I think that's enough. I don't see much more. Actually, I think that tree comes down. Can't see very well. If you can't see it, don't put it in. Right, so now I need to deal with some of the foliage that's around the house. And that's really quite bright. Some coming out from underneath the trees here. Bit of shadow. Make it slightly darker under there. There's some foliage in here, a little sort of box affair with some plants in. Willy Lott obviously looked after his place, although I don't suppose he did that. Maybe some geraniums in there. Yeah, bit of colour. There's lots of foliage going on all around the house here, so I'm moving that because it's showing, the sun is shining on my work. So let's pop this in a nice easy way, but changing the tones and the colours somewhat as well. Right, so there's lots of greenery growing up all around the house, but I'm leaving light. Again, using my smaller, well, medium-sized foliage brush. It's bedding the house in nicely. There'll always be lots of depth at the base of it here. That's the edge of the pond. Right, I've got some lovely green gold here, which I'm going to use as I come further forward. Into the picture. Foliage growing all along the edge of the road. So twist the brush around, move it around, make different shapes. Wet it a little bit now and again so that it doesn't get too dry. This is a river bank now, or pond, I don't know. Pond, I think, really. Nice edge here, with some depth in it as well. It's very sort of red at this end. Right, that might dry up looking okay. Just touch it up a little bit with the sword brush. So we're not getting fussy with it, we're just painting what we see, but in a fairly loose way. Without getting fussy. Some nice grasses coming into the picture, a few in front of the house. But just as we did with the trees, don't paint every leaf. I know that your brain tells you that every tree's got hundreds of leaves and then you set to and start painting them all. Don't do that. Just do what we did with the foliage brush and indicate those leaves on the trees, and the same thing with grasses. You don't paint every single blade of grass, just indicate some here and there, which is giving some nice little bits of detail without getting fussy. The road's disappearing. Right, I think that's good enough for the... You've got the idea there with the foliage, perhaps. Can't see much of the step, but there's something going on there, but I'm going to keep that quite light. Apart from that bit. That's the top of the step, so that's got light shining on it. Then it gets dark underneath and by the side. There. Right. I'm going to stop and get ready to do something about the reflections. I would obviously make it much easier for myself if I actually did a drawing of the reflections, but I'm not going to. I prefer to just keep it very soft, very loose, and not particularly contrived, which I think it does get a bit like that if you are not careful with drawing things like reflections and shadows and things. I know some artists do, but I'm one that doesn't. I've popped a piece of tape across because that's as far down as my mount's going to sit. So I'm actually just reflecting the sky down into the water, mostly either side because it's very light here. Good. And while that's wet, I'm going to just, wrong colour. Reflects down some nice grasses. That's what happens when you don't test your colour fast, so do. And I've got to make sure that I show that it's water. It's fairly still on that photograph, but I'm moving it around just a little bit. And just making marks that might look like water that's moving around a little bit. Keeping the water quite level. So the actual foliage that's reflected down is actually coming in quite a way, but there's this depth here that's the river bank which needs to show up, so that gives a nice edge to the river bank there. And then, as I say, I suppose nearly every week it's good to put the darks in. Right, okay, so I've got to reflect a little bit of the cottage now, but there's not a great deal of it showing, and I might have more control if I use my round brush as well as the flat brush. So, very watery mix here to put in a little bit of the rooftop, so it's going to look, it's got to be a mirror image, hasn't it? So it's going to look something like this. Here. And then the chimney would be here, but I can't see that. And then it gets quite dark in here. So there's a conglomeration of bits of building here. And so I don't see that much just some of the dark. Chimney. So while that's still damp, I'm actually going to just do this. To mix it up a little bit and make it look watery and as if it's moving a little bit more than it actually is on the photo. That way you don't have to concentrate too hard on the actual, some depth here. You don't have to concentrate too heavily on the buildings being particularly shapely. And there's shadow into the water as well, so this is why it's looking darker in places. In my head, if nowhere else. Okay, so guess you can see the windows a little bit. There's a window here. And then there's another one right way down here. Another window here. So just indicate rather than being too precise. That's going to help. Didn't really mean that to happen. Then I think the foliage needs to come out more, and a little bit more of the so then I think the foliage can come up to meet that. A little bush there, it's quite pink. And I think that's all I'm prepared to do when it comes to the reflection, because it isn't all about the reflection today, but it had to go in, I think. That's all it's going to have. And hopefully, I'm going to just stop, dry it off so you can see it dry, and that'll be that. There we are. We have Willy Lott's Cottage all dried up, and I'm not too displeased with it, considering it was a demonstration. There's a bit of touching up to do here and there, but it does look nice now that I've taken the masking off. Those little light areas have made a bit of a difference. So have a go. I'll attach it and let's see how you get on with it. Or something different that you may decide to choose. And as if that wasn't challenging enough, I actually painted another scene that some of you may find familiar, and that's Elm Hill in Norwich. It is nice to actually paint something that you know or that you've painted before or familiar with in some way. And this is another nice challenge if you're painting buildings, to have a sort of receding street. We see lots of those in Corfu and, you know, various places, and Elm Hill is a very good example of that. And I had the photo, which I think was another sunny day, but I made it wintry, more so anyway, and put some figures in to give it some life, which is another thing we've been working on this month. Okay, so have a go at something like this, and I know it is a challenge for some, but just keep it simple if you haven't done anything like this before, and maybe just find one little barn or something that you could paint with some surrounding foliage or whatever. But go for the challenge if you are an established painter and feel like doing something like this. Next week I will, I think, be painting, I'll continue with buildings and so on, but I think line and wash, and maybe some little areas of buildings like doors and windows and scruffy things, maybe rocks and stuff like that we haven't had much to do with lately. And so, you know, just little areas of things, I think, with our pen and ink. Okay, as from next week. Have a good week, and I look forward to seeing what you do. Take care. Bye-bye.